Amaka, pack your things and leave my house today. If you refuse to marry that blind man, you'll have nowhere to sleep tonight. Madam Kate's voice cut through the sitting room like a slap. Amaka stood frozen in the middle of it, tears sliding down her cheeks while everyone stared at her. By the door stood a quiet man with a walking stick and dark glasses, poor-looking, helpless-looking, and according to everyone in that room, the man Amaka was about to marry. Nobody knew the truth about him. Not even Amaka. What she didn't know was that the man pretending not to see was, in fact, seeing everything. He'd walked into that house for one reason: to find out whether Amaka would love a man for who he was, or write him off for what he appeared to be. And before the night was over, a decision Madam Kate made in a fit of spite would upend every life in that family. But to understand how Amaka ended up facing a stranger she never wanted to marry, we have to go back to the beginning. Amaka lived with her father, Ubani, her stepmother, Madam Kate, and her two stepsisters Linda and Rose in a noisy, crowded part of the city. The house wasn't poor, but it was never quite comfortable either. It sat behind Madam Kate's small restaurant, and from morning till night the street outside smelled of fried fish, pepper soup, rice and fresh bread. Ubani was a carpenter, a quiet man who spent his days bent over tables, doors, wardrobes, chairs, building things for other people's houses. He worked hard, but the money never stretched as far as he wanted it to. Madam Kate was cut from different cloth entirely. She thought constantly about money and status, about what people would say about her family. She wanted her daughters married to wealthy men, wanted a seat among the important guests at weddings, wanted them dressed well and driven around in good cars. Amaka had no place in that picture. From the very first day she came to live under that roof, Madam Kate made sure she understood she wasn't one of the family, not really. So Amaka was the one who woke before everyone else. She swept the compound, cleaned the rooms, washed the clothes, made breakfast, scrubbed the plates, then headed to the restaurant to help run the day's business. Linda and Rose, meanwhile, slept in as late as they pleased, then spent their hours getting dressed up, gossiping on their phones, visiting friends, planning the next outing. And no matter how hard Amaka worked, Madam Kate always found something wrong. Amaka, look at this floor. You call that cleaning? I cleaned it this morning, Mama. Don't call me Mama when you clearly haven't done what I asked. I'm sorry. You're always sorry. A wave of the hand. Go and do it again. Amaka would pick up the broom without a word. She rarely argued anymore. She'd learned, painfully, that sometimes the person who's supposed to protect you is exactly the person you have to learn to survive around. Her father saw how his wife treated his daughter. He knew it wasn't fair. But he hated conflict more than he hated injustice, and whenever he tried to say something, Madam Kate turned it into a war. You always take her side. She's my daughter, Kate. And my daughters are your daughters too. Why does everything have to be about Amaka? He'd go quiet after that. He loved Amaka, but every time he stood up for her, the house stayed tense for days afterward, and eventually the fear of that tension became its own kind of surrender. Amaka learned to endure it quietly. But there was one thing Madam Kate could never fully control: what people outside the house saw when they looked at her stepdaughter. The customers loved her. She served food with a smile even on the days she was dead tired. She helped an elderly woman carry her bags without being asked. When someone forgot their money and promised to come back and pay, she'd let them eat anyway. If a customer was rude to her, she apologized and kept moving. People noticed. And before long, the young men in the neighborhood started noticing too, which was exactly the problem as far as Madam Kate was concerned. Whenever a man showed real interest in Amaka, Madam Kate found a way to shut it down. One afternoon, a young businessman named Samuel, who'd been coming around for weeks, finally worked up the courage to speak to her directly. Madam, I'd like to talk to you about Amaka. Madam Kate looked him over. About Amaka? Yes. I respect her. I'd like to get to know her family properly. She smiled, though it wasn't the smile of a woman who was happy. My son, you're making a mistake. A mistake. Amaka isn't what you think she is. She has no head for business. No ambition. She's too simple a girl. A man like you needs someone who can stand beside him. She glanced toward the kitchen where Amaka was elbow deep in dishwater, then called out, Linda, come here. Linda appeared, dressed to the nines. This is my daughter Linda. She understands business. She knows how to carry herself. If you're serious about finding a good woman, you should be talking to her. Samuel thanked her politely and left without another word to Linda. He never came back, not because he'd lost interest, but because Amaka never learned there'd been anything to lose. It kept happening. Every time a man showed interest, Madam Kate found a reason to run him off. A lie here, an exaggerated flaw there, or simply steering the conversation toward Linda or Rose instead. Amaka began to wonder quietly what was wrong with her, why no one ever came back a second time. One evening, washing plates behind the restaurant, she caught her own reflection in a bucket of water. "Maybe I'm just not good enough," she whispered and wiped her eyes before anyone could see. She had no idea someone was watching her from across the street. He'd arrived in town that afternoon, a young man calling himself Alex, dressed in a plain shirt, worn trousers, old sandals, dark glasses, moving slowly behind a walking stick as though he could barely find his footing. It was all a lie. Alex wasn't poor. Far from it. He was a successful businessman with interests in real estate, construction, and property management, operating across the city and into a neighboring country. He owned several houses, a handful of properties, cars most people in this town would never sit inside. None of that showed in the man standing across from the restaurant that afternoon, and that was exactly the point. He didn't want anyone to know who he really was. For months he'd been hearing stories about people who saved their respect for the rich and their contempt for the poor, and he wanted to know, for once, what it felt like to be loved without money in the equation. A friend had mentioned this town, mentioned a girl. "There's a girl there named Amaka," his friend had told him. "People say she's one of the kindest women you'll ever meet." So he came to see for himself. He didn't approach her right away. He stood across the street and watched her carry a tray out to an elderly customer, watched her stoop to help a woman gather food that had spilled from a torn bag, watched her flash a tired delivery man a genuine smile. Then a customer left his wallet behind on the table. Amaka spotted it, snatched it up, and ran outside before the man got far. "Sir, you forgot your wallet." He spun around, startled. "Oh, thank you. Please keep it somewhere safe," she said, smiling, and went back inside. Alex had seen enough to be curious. That evening he started asking around. "Amaka? She's a good girl," said the first person he asked. "Hardworking," said another. "She helps everybody," said a third. Then an old man lowered his voice. "There's only one problem." "What problem?" "The woman she lives with." "Her stepmother?" "Yes, Madam Kate." The man sighed. "If you're thinking of marrying that girl, be careful. Madam Kate doesn't let men take Amaka away easily. If you're a man of means, she'll turn you down flat and push one of her own daughters at you instead." Alex allowed himself a small smile. "And if the man refuses to be pushed? Then you'll never marry Amaka." He looked back toward the restaurant, where Amaka was still working, and said nothing for a long moment. Then his grip tightened around the walking stick. "Interesting," he murmured. That night he made up his mind. He wouldn't approach Amaka as a wealthy man. He'd come to her as a poor, blind stranger, and see whether Madam Kate would still fight to keep the two of them apart. The next morning he was back, glasses pressed close, stick tapping ahead of him as he shuffled toward the restaurant like a man half lost in the world. Amaka saw him first. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you?" He turned his face toward her voice. "Yes, please, I need somewhere to sit." She pulled a chair closer. "Here, sir." Then a cup of water, set gently in front of him. "You look tired." "I've been traveling a long while." "Where are you coming from?" "Far away." She didn't press. She brought him food instead, and when he reached into his pocket to pay, she stopped his hand. "Eat first." "I need to pay you." "You're not owing me anything. Eat." Something in those words landed harder than she could have known. Here was a man with more money than she'd ever be able to guess at, and she was feeding him for free out of pure decency. He sat with that for a moment, quiet. When he'd finished, he stood slowly. "Please, can I speak with your family?" She blinked. "My family?" "Yes." "Why?" He took a breath. "I came here because I heard something about you." "What did you hear?" "That you're a good woman." She looked down at her hands. "I just try to do my best. I'd like to marry you." The plate nearly slipped from Amaka's fingers. Before she could find her voice, Madam Kate stepped out of the restaurant, having caught the tail end of everything. She looked the stranger over, the dark glasses, the shabby clothes, the old sandals, the walking stick, no car in sight, nothing that hinted at money, and something in her face brightened. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking at a suitor she needed to chase off. She was looking at a way to get rid of Amaka for good. "You want to marry Amaka?" she said, stepping forward before the girl could speak. "Yes, madam." "Then you have my blessing." Amaka's eyes went wide. "Mama? What?" "I haven't agreed to anything. You have no reason to refuse. But I don't even know him." "You don't need to know him. You've lived under my roof long enough. It's time you left it." Amaka turned to her father, who'd just come out of the workshop at the sound of raised voices. Papa. Yubani looked at his daughter and felt something in his chest crack at the sight of her tears. He opened his mouth, but Madam Kate got there first. She's useless in this house. Nothing but trouble. If this man wants her, let him have her. Amaka covered her face with both hands. Years of cooking, cleaning, serving, and the moment a stranger showed up with nothing but a walking stick, her stepmother couldn't wait to hand her over. Alex stood there quietly, dark glasses hiding eyes that for once were wide open, taking in every bit of it. For the first time he understood exactly how much this woman had been made to suffer. One question remained: would Amaka go through with it? And if she did, how long could Alex keep up the lie of who he really was? That night, before she went to bed, Madam Kate gave her only one choice. Marry the blind man, she said coldly, or leave this house with nothing. Amaka looked toward her father. Yubani lowered his eyes and said nothing. She wiped her tears and said nothing either. She had no idea that the man waiting to become her husband was nothing like the helpless stranger everyone believed him to be, no idea that walking into his home would mark the beginning of Madam Kate's undoing. And she certainly had no idea that the quiet, blind stranger had already, quietly begun to fall for her, for the kindness she'd shown a man she believed had nothing at all to give her back. Amaka didn't sleep that night. She lay staring at the ceiling in the dark, tears sliding slowly down the sides of her face, her mind circling the same questions over and over. How could her whole life turn upside down in a single afternoon? How was she supposed to marry a man she'd met that same day, a man who could barely walk without a stick, whose story she knew nothing about? She rolled onto her side and wiped her cheeks. I don't even know him, she whispered to the dark. Nobody answered. Across the compound, Madam Kate slept soundly. As far as she was concerned, the problem had solved itself. Amaka would finally be gone. The next morning she woke Amaka before the sun was up. Get up. Amaka blinked awake. Mama? Don't call me Mama. Get up and start preparing. Preparing for what? Madam Kate gave her a look as if the question itself was an insult. For your marriage, of course. Amaka pushed herself upright. My marriage? Yes. Or have you already forgotten the blind man? Something tightened in Amaka's chest. Mama, please, I don't want to marry him. Madam Kate actually laughed. You don't want to marry him? No. Then where will you go? Amaka had no answer for that, and Madam Kate knew it. Exactly, she said. You have nowhere to go. Your father can barely keep this house running. You think he can afford to rent you another one? She picked up a folded cloth from the bed without looking at Amaka. You've been a burden in this house long enough. Someone has finally come to take you off our hands, and you should be grateful. He's a stranger, Mama. I don't even know what kind of man he is. So, you think you're too good for a blind man? No. Then stop acting like you're too important to marry him. The words landed like a slap. Amaka had never once thought she was better than anyone. She'd only wanted the ordinary right to choose who she'd spend her life with. She said nothing more. She got up and got dressed. At breakfast, her father barely said a word. Amaka could see the sadness sitting behind his eyes. Papa, she said softly. He looked up. I'm sorry. For what? For everything. You don't have to apologize. I should have protected you more. She reached across the table and took his hand. You're still my father. He squeezed it. I wanted a better life for you than this. I know. I spoke to Kate last night. What did she say? He looked away. That if you refuse this marriage, she'll make life hard for everyone in this house. Amaka's eyes filled. So you want me to marry him? He didn't answer. You didn't have to. She understood well enough. Her father wasn't a man who didn't love her. He was a man who'd spent years learning to avoid Madam Kate's wrath at any cost. And somehow that silence hurt worse than if he'd said the words outright. Alex came back that afternoon, dressed the same as before, stick in hand. Amaka's stomach dropped when she saw him coming. He stopped near the restaurant. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, she answered, barely above a whisper. Are you ready? She looked at him. Ready for what? Our marriage. She lowered her eyes. I don't know. He was quiet for a moment. I understand, he said gently. You don't. I think I do. You don't know what it feels like to be told you have to marry someone you've never known. Something shifted in his face. You're right. I don't. I'm sorry, she said. You don't have to apologize for that. Then why did you come back? Because I wanted to talk to you without anyone standing over you forcing your hand. That caught her off guard. You did. Yes. He sat down across from her. I won't pretend I don't want this marriage, I do. But I don't want you walking into it because you were pushed there. She studied him for a moment, wondering, not for the first time, whether she'd been too quick to judge. There was something in the way he spoke that didn't match the man in front of her. No begging, no helplessness in his voice. He sounded calm, sure of himself. Strangely sure for a man everyone believed had nothing. Why me? She asked. Because I watched you, he said. I saw you help people who had nothing to give you back. I saw you chase down a man who left his wallet behind. I saw you feed someone who couldn't pay. I saw you work hard even on the days it was clear you were exhausted. I don't understand. I wanted to find a woman whose kindness didn't come with a price tag. She held his gaze a long moment, then asked the question that had been sitting in her chest. Do you have a family? Yes. Where are they? Far from here. Do they know you want to marry me? He hesitated. They know I'm making an important decision. It was a strange answer, but she let it go. She looked down at her hands instead. I'm afraid. I know. I don't know what my life is going to look like. Neither do I, he said. For the first time all day she almost smiled. But before either of them could say anything more, Madame Kate appeared. What are you two discussing? Amaka was on her feet at once. Nothing. Madame Kate turned to Alex. Don't worry yourself. She'll be your wife. Madam, Amaka started. No. Madame Kate pointed toward the kitchen. Go finish your work. Amaka walked away without another word. Alex stayed seated. Madame Kate stepped closer to him. You should take her as soon as possible. He turned his face toward her voice. Why is that? She's stubborn. She might try to change her mind. I see. So the wedding should happen quickly. If that's what you want, he said slowly. It's what's best, she said, satisfied. Alex lowered his head so she wouldn't catch the smile pulling at his mouth. She had no idea what she was actually doing. The wedding preparations moved fast after that. Madame Kate had no interest in a big ceremony, she wanted it done and finished. She told the neighbors that Amaka had finally found a man willing to take her. Some people pitied Amaka. Others were simply surprised. Nobody knew the real story underneath it. On the morning of the wedding, Amaka sat quietly while her father helped her get ready. There was no expensive jewelry, no grand dress, none of the excitement a wedding morning was supposed to carry, just a simple dress and a face full of worry about a future she couldn't see. Ubani looked at her and said, You're beautiful. She managed a weak smile. Thank you, Papa. He took her hands in his. Whatever happens, remember, you are not useless. You're kind. You work harder than anyone I know. You have a good heart. Don't ever let anybody tell you different. Her eyes filled again. Papa. She hugged him, and for a few seconds neither of them said anything at all. Then a knock came at the door. It's time. She took a breath and stepped outside, where Alex stood waiting near the car, dressed simply, dark glasses in place, stick resting in his hand. As she passed, she heard the whispers. That's the blind man. Poor girl. I don't know how she'll manage. She pretended not to hear them. Alex heard them too and said nothing. The ceremony itself was small, just a handful of people. When it was over, Amaka was officially Alex's wife. Madame Kate was the first to congratulate them, though not out of any happiness for Amaka. She simply wanted the girl gone for good. Take good care of her, she told Alex. I will. She turned to Amaka with a thin smile. Don't come back here complaining. I won't, Amaka said. Good. Her father stepped forward and she wrapped her arms around him. Take care of yourself, Papa. You too. She got into Alex's car, an old, unremarkable thing he'd chosen deliberately, part of the disguise, and as they pulled away she looked back through the window at the house where she'd spent so many years of her life, not sure whether she wanted to cry or breathe a sigh of relief. Alex noticed the tears anyway. You can cry, you know. I'm not crying. You are. She managed a small smile. Can you see that? He froze just for a second, then laughed it off. I can hear it. She nodded, and for the first time that whole day she laughed too. They drove for a while in silence. Eventually Alex asked, Are you hungry? A little. There's food in the back. She reached behind her seat and found a neatly packed box, food from what was clearly an expensive restaurant. Where did this come from? A friend picked it up. She let it go and didn't think much more of it. But the plain car, like everything else about him so far, was only half the story. Before long the crowded streets gave way to open road, and Amaka started to grow uneasy. Where are we going? Home. Where's the house? He smiled. You'll see. A few minutes later the car pulled up to a massive gate. Amaka went still. Security lights lined the compound wall. The building behind it looked less like a house and more like a hotel. Are we in the right place? She asked. Yes. But. She stared at it. Whose house is this? It's enormous. It belongs to someone I know. Who? He paused. Me. She turned to stare at him. What? He caught himself. I mean, I'm staying here. She got out of the car, confused, as a guard swung the gate open and another man stepped forward to greet them. Welcome home, sir. Amaka stopped walking. She looked at the man, then at Alex. Sir? The guard seemed to realize his mistake a beat too late and dropped his eyes. Sorry. Alex said nothing. Amaka's suspicion sharpened. Inside, the house took her breath away. Expensive furniture, walls covered in art, polished floors, elegant lighting everywhere she looked. She turned slowly in a circle. Alex, what kind of house is this? Our home, he said. You told me you were poor. He said nothing. You never actually said that, he finally offered. You came to the restaurant in old clothes. Yes. You walked with a stick. Yes. You told my stepmother you wanted to marry me, while pretending to be a blind, poor man. Yes. And now you're standing in a mansion? Yes. Her heart was pounding now. Something was very wrong here. She looked hard at his face. Alex, can you actually see? The room went completely silent. Slowly he reached up and took off the dark glasses. For the first time since she'd met him, Amaka saw his eyes clearly, and he looked directly back at her. She took a step back. You can see. Yes. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. Why would you lie to everyone like that? He took a slow breath. Because I needed to find something out. What? Whether you'd still accept me if you believed I had nothing at all. She stared at him, a tangle of confusion, anger, and embarrassment rising in her chest, and underneath all of it, something else she couldn't quite name. She had married a man she believed was blind and poor. Now she was standing in a mansion, married to a man with perfect sight, and she had no idea what else he'd been hiding from her. My name is Alex Williams, he said quietly. I own several real estate companies. I have businesses in this city and across the border. This house is mine. Amaka couldn't move. The man Madame Kate had dismissed as poor and useless turned out to be wealthier than anything she could have imagined. But that wasn't even the biggest surprise waiting for her. Alex hadn't chosen her out of pity. He'd chosen her because he'd watched her be kind when she thought no one who mattered was watching. And now that the truth was out, one question remained. Would she forgive him for the lie the marriage had started with, or walk away from it altogether? He stepped closer. Amaka, before you decide anything, there's something else you need to know. She looked up at him. What? His expression turned serious. The reason I came to your town wasn't only because I'd heard you were kind. Her heart skipped. Then why did you really come? He glanced toward the door. Because someone from your past told me something about your family. She stared at him. What did they tell you? He didn't answer right away, and in that silence, Amaka realized the story she thought she knew about her own family might not be the whole story at all. Someone from your past told me something about your family, Alex said again. Amaka stood in the middle of the beautiful living room, still trying to process what she'd just heard. Only minutes earlier she'd learned that the blind, poor man she'd been forced to marry was neither blind nor poor. Now he was telling her he'd come to her town in the first place because of something someone had said about her family. What did they tell you? She asked. He looked at her carefully. That your life hasn't always been what people think it is. Her heart sped up. What's that supposed to mean? I don't want to tell you something that might not even be true. Then tell me what you heard. He walked to the window and looked out at the dark. There's a man named Peter. He knew your father years ago. Peter? I don't know anyone by that name. I know. Then why is he talking about my family? Because he believes there's something your father's never told you. Unease crept up her spine. My father wouldn't hide something important from me. Alex turned to face her. Are you sure? She didn't answer right away. She wanted to say yes without hesitation, but some part of her remembered how quiet her father always went whenever Madame Kate brought up the past, remembered the handful of times she'd asked about her mother and watched him change the subject without fail. She'd grown up knowing almost nothing about the woman who'd given birth to her, only that she'd died young. There'd always been questions she never dared ask out loud. Why did her father hardly speak of her? Why did Madame Kate's temper flare the moment Amaka's mother came up? Why had her father remarried so quickly after her mother died? Alex came closer. I'm not trying to frighten you. Then what do you want from me tonight? Nothing tonight. You've already had more than enough to sit with. You deceived me, she said flatly. I know. You let me believe you were blind. Yes. You let me believe you were poor. You let me marry you without telling me who you actually were. He lowered his head. You're right about all of it. Her eyes brimmed over. Do you have any idea how humiliated I feel? I wasn't looking for a rich husband. I never wanted a mansion. I just wanted someone who'd respect me. I know that. No, you don't. I do, he said. That's exactly why I couldn't just ask you outright. She shook her head. You could have simply talked to me. I should have. Silence settled between them. Then he said something she didn't expect. I didn't plan on caring about you this much. She looked up. What? I came to your town with a plan, watch you for a few days, get a read on your character, leave. But then I saw the way you treated people when nobody important was watching. You fed a man who couldn't pay you back. You chased down a stranger to return his wallet. You worked all day without a single complaint, even while your own family treated you like you didn't matter. He paused. That's exactly why I chose you. She looked away, unsure what to do with that. I was only doing what felt right. For the first time since the truth had come out, her anger began to loosen its grip, though the questions hadn't stopped. Do you love me? She asked quietly. He held her gaze. I'm starting to. Something shifted in her chest at that, and she looked away before he could see it. I need time. You can have it. And I won't be forced into anything again. No one will force you, he said, stepping back. This is your home now, whether you decide to stay or not. If you want to leave, I'll take you wherever you want to go. She looked around at the mansion, the marble, the paintings, all of it, and thought of Madame Kate calling her useless, of the wedding, of the whispers outside, of her father's bowed head. I don't want to run away, she said finally. Then stay. But I want the truth. All of it. You'll have it. Amaka woke early the next morning out of old habit. Years of rising before everyone else weren't so easily unlearned. She slipped quietly into the kitchen and found several staff already at work preparing breakfast. Good morning, madam, one of them said. She actually turned to see who they were talking to before it registered. Madam? Yes, ma. You don't have to call me that, she said a little awkwardly. Alex found her there after breakfast. You're up early. Old habit. You don't need to wake up early anymore, you know? She smiled faintly. I know. I just don't know how to sleep late. He laughed, really laughed, freer than she'd seen from him yet, and they sat together for a while without talking. Then he said, I spoke to Peter last night. Her expression sharpened instantly. What did he say? He wants to meet you. Why? He says there's something you should know about your mother. Her hands went cold. My mother? He wants to explain it in person. She was on her feet before she decided to move. I want to go now. Then we'll go. They drove into the city that afternoon. This time Alex didn't bother with the disguise. He wore a simple, clearly expensive suit, and Amaka sat beside him still trying to adjust to the shape of her new life. The moment they stepped into the restaurant, the manager hurried over. Good afternoon, Mr. Alex. Good afternoon, Alex said, nodding while Amaka took in, quietly, carefully, just how many people seemed to know exactly who he was. They were shown to a private table. A few minutes later an older man came in and Alex rose to greet him. Mr. Peter. Alex. The man's eyes moved to Amaka, and something in his face changed. Are you Amaka? Yes. He lowered himself into a chair slowly, studying her for a long moment before he spoke. You look exactly like your mother. Her eyes filled instantly. You knew her? I did. Who was she? Really? Peter took a breath. Her name was Sarah. I know that already. But something in his voice told her there was more coming. Tell me about her. He glanced at Alex, then back at her. Your mother wasn't the poor woman everyone believed her to be. Amaka went still. What do you mean? She came from a wealthy family. That can't be true. It is. Then why didn't my father ever tell me? Peter exhaled slowly. Because everything changed after she died. Changed how? He lowered his voice. Your mother owned property. Land, houses, businesses, real assets registered in her name. Amaka could barely breathe. Where is all of it now? His face fell. That's the problem. It disappeared from your family's records. How does property just disappear? Peter looked at Alex again, but Alex said nothing, so he pressed on. Before she died, the documents were in her name. After, they were transferred. To who? He hesitated. Someone close to your father. Her stomach dropped. Who, Peter? He looked her straight in the eye. Madam Kate. Amaka stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. No. I'm sorry. You're wrong. I stayed quiet about this for years because I didn't want trouble. My stepmother, she said, as though saying it aloud might make it less true. Why would she do that? I don't know the whole of it. Your mother trusted your father completely. She believed her property would stay safe with him. Tears were falling freely now. And my father, what about him? He knew something, Peter said carefully. The floor seemed to tilt under her. He knew. He knew documents had been moved. Then why didn't he say anything? Ever? Peter looked down at the table. Because he was afraid of losing everything he had left. Amaka sank back into her chair, memories rearranging themselves in her head all at once. Her father's silences, Madam Kate's temper, her need to control every corner of that house, the way she chased off every man who ever looked twice at Amaka. Was all of it connected? Alex reached for her hand. She pulled it back. I need to think, she said. Peter nodded slowly. There's something else. She looked up, wary now. What? Your mother left something for you. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small brown envelope, sliding it across the table. Something she wrote before she died. Amaka's hands shook as she took it. Did you know about this? She asked Alex. I knew a document existed. I never knew what was in it. She opened it carefully. Inside was an old letter, the handwriting unmistakably a mother's, unmistakably careful. My dear daughter, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer there to protect you. She had to stop and breathe before continuing. There are people around you who may smile at you while hiding the truth. Trust your heart, but never ignore what your eyes show you. Her hands were trembling badly now. She read on to the final lines. Your father loves you, but there is something he has been too afraid to tell you. When the time comes, ask him about the house on the hill. She looked up. The house on the hill? Peter nodded. That house is the key to all of it. What house? Amaka asked Alex. His expression tightened. The small one just outside town? That's the one, Peter said. Something surfaced in Amaka's memory, her father years ago standing at the edge of their compound staring off toward a distant hill, going quiet every time she'd asked what was up there. Now she understood why. Her mother's own words had pointed straight to it. But there was another problem waiting on the other side of all this. Madam Kate had no idea any of it had come to light, and when she found out, she wasn't going to take it lying down. They drove home in near silence that evening. Amaka went straight to her room the moment they arrived. Alex followed as far as the doorway and stopped. Are you okay? No. I understand. She turned back to him. Alex. Yes. Thank you. For what? For telling me the truth today, even with everything you were still hiding from me yourself. He gave her a sad half-smile. I still owe you more of it, actually. Her stomach tightened. What do you mean? He took a breath. There's something about that house on the hill I haven't told you yet. What? I've been there before. Her eyes widened. When? Before I ever came to your town. Why? Because I found something there. What did you find? He hesitated a beat too long before answering. A name. Mother's. Amaka's heart seemed to stop in her chest. Before she could ask anything else, he added quietly, she may have left behind more than just property. What else could there possibly be? His voice dropped lower still. A truth that could change everything you think you know about your family. Outside, the evening light faded into full dark. And somewhere far off, on the hill where an old, forgotten house still stood, a secret waited to be found. Your mother may have left behind more than property. Those words followed Amaka through the entire night. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes she saw the old letter, her mother's handwriting, Peter's voice explaining how the properties had vanished after her mother died. And above all of it, she kept circling back to the house on the hill. Why had her mother mentioned it? Why had her father never once spoken of it? And why, of all people, had Alex already been there before he'd ever met her? By morning she'd made up her mind. I want to go there. Alex was already at the dining table when she came in. He looked up. Good morning. Good morning. You didn't sleep. Neither did you. He allowed a small smile. Fair enough. She sat down across from him. I want to go to the house on the hill. Today. I figured you would. Then why didn't you suggest it yourself? Because I wanted it to be your choice. She studied him. You keep saying that. Because you've spent too many years having other people make your choices for you, he said simply. Something in that landed deeper than she expected. She looked down at her hands. I don't want that anymore. Then we'll go. They left after breakfast, Alex driving himself this time, Amaka quiet beside him with the old letter still in her hand. The city thinned out behind them, fewer tall buildings, quieter roads, then trees and open land stretching on either side. Nearly an hour in, she spotted the hill rising in the distance and her pulse picked up. Is that it? That's it. The road turned rough as they climbed, and at the top they found a small, faded house sitting in overgrown grass, windows thick with dust, the whole place looking like nobody had set foot in it for years. Amaka got out of the car and stood there a moment, an odd, unplaceable familiarity settling over her. I've seen this house before, she said quietly. When? I don't know. She walked toward the front door where an old wooden chair sat against the wall. The moment her hand touched it, a memory surfaced unbidden, herself, much younger, sitting right there beside her mother, who was smiling down at her. It vanished as quickly as it came and she stumbled back a step. My mother brought me here. Are you sure? Alex asked, coming closer. I think so. I remember sitting right here. She pressed her fingers to her temple. Then let's find out what happened in this house. The door was locked, but Alex produced a key from his pocket. You have a key? I found it the last time I was here. He let them in. The smell of old wood hit her first, then the shapes of furniture under white sheets, shelves lined with boxes, a scatter of framed photographs. She moved slowly through the room until one photograph on the wall stopped her cold. She wiped the dust away with her sleeve, her mother standing beside a much younger Yubani, both of them smiling. My father, she breathed, touching the glass. They look happy, Alex said. She stared at her mother's face, drinking in a version of her she'd never had. She had so few real memories of the woman. Something warm rose in her chest. She was beautiful. Yes. She turned to him suddenly. You knew her? Not personally. Then how do you know about this place at all? I told you, I'd been looking into the property records. What? Who asked you to? He looked away instead of answering, and before she could push further, her attention snagged on a locked wooden cabinet in the corner. She crossed to it. Can you open this? Alex tried his key. It didn't fit. Amaka stood there, turning something over in her mind, until the line from the letter surfaced again. Trust your heart, but never ignore what your eyes show you. She looked around the room slowly, and her gaze landed back on the photograph, on the frame, which was thicker than it should have been. She lifted it off the wall. Tucked behind it was a small metal key. Alex. He crossed the room in 2 steps. What? He stopped when he saw what she was holding. That might be for the cabinet. It was. The lock gave, and inside, wrapped in an old cloth, sat a stack of papers. Property deeds, bank documents, letters, and a small notebook. Amaka lifted them out carefully. The first document had her own name written across the top. Amaka Yubani. Her hand started to shake. What is this? Alex took it from her gently, scanning it. A property transfer. To me? Yes. Dated before your mother died. He looked up. She wanted this to go to you. But look at the next page, he said and turned it for her. Her stomach dropped. The same property had been transferred again later, to Madame Kate. So Peter was telling the truth, she said, feeling the room tilt slightly. There's more. He held up another sheet. This shows the second transfer happened after your mother died. She sank onto the edge of a covered chair. Why would anyone do that? We need to know who signed off on it. They kept digging until Amaka pulled out a letter written in her father's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. Kate, I am begging you. Please do not take everything from Sarah's daughter. She trusted you. She stopped breathing for a second. Read it again. Her father had known. He'd known exactly what Madame Kate had done, and he had begged her, to stop. She pressed a hand over her mouth. Papa knew. Alex sat beside her. He may have known. We still need to understand why he never said a word. Amaka picked through another document and found a signature at the bottom she recognized instantly, Madame Kate's. But it was the date that caught her eye, just a few months after her mother's death. The same window when Madame Kate had married her father. She looked up slowly. Do you think she married my father because of the property? I don't know, Alex said after a pause. But the timing? It's suspicious. I won't pretend otherwise. She stood. We have to ask my father. Today. He nodded and started packing the documents away, until something on the last page of the notebook caught his eye. He read it when very still. What does it say? Amaka asked. He didn't answer at first. He just handed her the notebook. Alex, if you have found this, then Sarah's daughter is already with you. Amaka went cold. What? He took the notebook back, his face suddenly serious. That's my name. Why would my mother have written your name? I don't know. You told me you never knew her. I didn't. Then how did she know about you? He had no answer for that, and her thoughts spun trying to find one on his behalf. Then his eyes caught another line beneath it. Protect her from the people who smile in her father's house. Her eyes filled instantly. She knew. She knew something was coming. She must have, Alex said quietly. But how could she have known you'd be the one standing here? I don't know, he admitted, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Then he spotted a small envelope tucked beneath the notebook, a single word written across the front. Alex. She looked at him. You should open it. He did, slowly, and read the short letter inside once, then a second time. Whatever it said drained the color from his face. What is it? Amaka pressed. Alex, what does it say? He finally looked up at her. Your mother knew my father. She stared at him. Your father? Yes. How? He swallowed. He was in the property business years ago. They worked together. And what happened between them? He glanced back down at the letter. He died believing he'd been cheated. By who? By the same person who took your mother's property. Her heart was pounding now. Madame Kate. He nodded slowly. Then that means... Yes. What? His voice dropped almost to nothing. That your mother's story and my family's story might be the same story. That was when they heard a car pull up outside. They both froze. Alex swept the documents together fast. Who could that be? Amaka moved to the window and looked down. A black car had stopped in front of the house, its doors opening, two figures stepping out. Then she saw who was walking toward the door, and every drop of color left her face. Alex. What? That's Madame Kate. He looked through the window himself. She wasn't alone. There was a man beside her Amaka had never seen before, and Madame Kate was walking straight for the house as though she'd known exactly where to find them. Amaka, she shouted from outside. Come out here. How does she even know we're here? Amaka whispered. Alex looked down at the documents in his hands, then back at her. I think she knows we found everything. The knock came hard against the door. Amaka. Open this door right now. Amaka stood perfectly still. For the first time in her life she realized she wasn't afraid of that voice. She was furious. What she didn't know yet was that the man standing beside Madame Kate carried a piece of news that would explain, once and for all, why the woman had fought so hard to control every part of her life. And when Amaka finally heard it, she would learn that her stepmother had been sitting on a secret far bigger than a few stolen documents. The truth was almost out now. And this time, no one was going to be able to hold it back. The drive back into the city was quiet. Amaka stared out the window, trying to make sense of how many secrets had been living around her while she knew none of them. Yubani was sitting alone in the workshop when they arrived. One look at his daughter's face and he knew. You found the house, he said. She stopped in the doorway. You knew about it? He closed his eyes. Yes. Then tell me everything. He looked at Alex, then back at her. I should have told you years ago. Why didn't you? Because I was ashamed. She sat down across from him and slowly, haltingly he began. Your mother trusted me. She believed I'd protect everything she left behind for you. What happened? I owed money. I'd borrowed to expand the workshop and business turned bad. I couldn't keep up with the debts. And Madame Kate offered to help. He nodded. But she wanted something for it. Control over some of the property. And you agreed. I thought I'd earn it back before it mattered. Did you? No. His head dropped. By the time I understood what had happened, the papers were already changed. Her eyes filled. Why didn't you fight for me, Papa? I was afraid. You were my father. I know. You should have protected me. I know, he said, his voice cracking. I failed you. She cried then, and he cried with her, not because she wanted to punish him with it, but because she'd waited years to hear him say those exact words, to know that her loneliness hadn't gone unnoticed by him. I was so lonely, Papa. I know. I thought you didn't care. I cared every single day. Then why did you let her treat me that way? He had no answer for that. She crossed the room and hugged him instead, and he wept against her shoulder. I'm sorry. I forgive you, she said and held him tighter. Alex stood off to the side, quiet. He'd seen a great deal in his life, but watching a father finally admit to his own failure moved him more than he expected. After a while, Yubani looked up at him. Who are you really? You already know, Alex said with a faint smile. No, I've heard your name somewhere before. My father was Daniel Williams. Yubani's face changed completely. Daniel? Yes. He rose slowly to his feet. You're Daniel's son. I am. Then you know. Some of it. Yubani sat back down heavily. Your father believed Sarah had been cheated. He was right. I wanted to help him. I was just too afraid to. He died believing he'd lost everything. I'm sorry, Yubani said quietly. Alex took a slow breath. For years I wanted to know who was responsible. His eyes drifted to Madame Kate, who just arrived behind them, standing silently in the doorway. I found the documents. But I didn't come here for revenge. He looked around at all of them. I came for the truth. Amaka looked at him with something close to awe. He had the wealth and the influence to have crushed Madame Kate without a second thought, and instead all he'd wanted was the truth laid bare. Then Michael stepped forward again. There's one more document. Everyone turned to him. What document? Alex asked. Michael pulled a folder from his bag. Your mother kept this, Amaka. He handed it over. Inside was a legal agreement, her mother's property placed in a trust with one condition attached. Full control would pass to Amaka the moment she came of age. So it was never legally Madame Kate's at all, Amaka said. No, Michael confirmed. Then why did no one ever tell me? Because the original was hidden. Where? He nodded toward the hill behind them. You already found it. Amaka's eyes widened. There was a second page beneath the first. She read it slowly. If my daughter ever finds this document, I want her to know she must not measure her worth by the people who rejected her. She couldn't hold the tears back after that. Her mother had written those words long before she could have known exactly how much her daughter would need them one day. She read on to the last line. Choose a man who sees your heart before he sees your beauty, and who will respect you whether you have wealth or nothing. She looked up and found Alex already watching her. For the first time, she understood exactly why he'd walked into her life disguised as a blind man. He'd wanted to see the part of her that people usually overlooked entirely. There was still one person who hadn't spoken. Madame Kate stepped forward at last. Amaka. Amaka looked at her, waiting. I know I've done wrong. I can't change the past. But I'm asking you for forgiveness. The room went still. Amaka could have turned away. She could have listed every painful year back at her, one by one. Instead she took a breath. I forgive you. Then, before Madame Kate could fully break down with relief, but forgiveness doesn't mean I'll forget. And it doesn't mean things go back to how they were. I understand, Madame Kate said, crying now. Then we start from here, Amaka said. Alex laid a hand gently on her shoulder, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt free, not because of the wealth, not because of the marriage, but because the truth had finally handed back something Madame Kate had never been able to take from her to begin with, her dignity. Weeks later, Amaka had started working alongside Alex on one of his community projects, visiting local businesses, backing people trying to rebuild their lives from nothing. She learned, watching him, that he'd always believed wealth meant very little if it couldn't be used to lift someone else up. Their marriage settled into something entirely different from what it had been on that first, fearful wedding day. The pressure was gone. The fear was gone. What remained was friendship, respect, and, slowly, unmistakably, love. But just when Amaka let herself believe the hardest part of her story was finally behind her, Alex took a phone call one afternoon that changed his expression the instant he answered. She noticed immediately. "What is it?" "Someone's made a claim against the property." "What kind of claim?" "They're saying the documents we found aren't valid." He hesitated. "Amaka, your mother may have had another heir." "Your mother may have had another heir." The word stopped Amaka's heart cold. She looked at Alex, waiting. "Another heir?" "Yes." "Who?" "We don't know yet." She sank slowly into a chair. After everything she'd already uncovered, her mother's property, Madame Kate's secret, her father's silence, Alex's real identity, she'd let herself believe the painful part of her story was finally winding down. And now there was one more thing waiting in the dark. "Where did this person even come from?" she asked. Alex set his phone on the table. "A lawyer called me this morning. Someone's come forward claiming a legal connection to your mother." "Did he give a name?" "David." She frowned. "I don't know anyone named David." "Neither did I." "Then how can he claim any connection to her at all?" "That's exactly what we're about to find out." The next morning they sat across from a lawyer named Mr. James, who laid a stack of documents on his desk between them. "This one's complicated," he warned. Amaka scanned the pages in front of her. "What's the actual claim?" He explained that a man named David had submitted paperwork suggesting Sarah, Amaka's mother, had once supported him financially, and had written a letter years ago acknowledging him as close family. Amaka's pulse jumped. Was he her son? "We don't know that yet." "Then who was he?" "That's what we're trying to establish." Alex leaned in. "Do the documents look genuine?" "Some of them do," Mr. James admitted. "Could he actually take the property?" Amaka asked. "Only if he can prove a real legal claim." She nodded, and to her own surprise she wasn't afraid. She'd spent too many years believing she had no voice in her own life. This time she was ready to fight for it if she had to. David arrived a few days later, calm, well-dressed, roughly Alex's age. Something about his face struck Amaka as oddly familiar the moment she saw him. He studied her for a long moment. "You're Sarah's daughter?" "Yes." "You look like her," he said with a sad kind of smile. A chill went through her. "You knew my mother?" "Yes." "How?" He sat down across from them. "She helped my family a long time ago. My mother's name was Helen." Amaka had never heard the name in her life. "Helen was your mother's closest friend," David went on. Alex looked up from the documents. "Then why is David filing an inheritance claim?" "I'm not here to take anything from her," David said, shaking his head. "Then why make the claim at all?" Amaka asked. "To make sure the truth actually came out." "What truth?" Alex asked. David took a breath. "Your mother once found out that people were trying to take control of her property." Amaka thought of Madame Kate immediately. She knew. She knew. Then why didn't she stop it? She was planning to. David slid another envelope across to her. "She wrote this for you." Amaka's hands shook as she took it. "Another letter?" "Another letter." She opened it. It was short. "My dear Amaka, if you're reading this, you've probably learned that people will try to make you doubt your worth. Please remember, your inheritance is not the most valuable thing I left you. Your character is. Money can build a house, but kindness builds a home. Never let bitterness become who you are." She kept reading, eyes blurring. "I also want you to know that Helen's son, David, is not your enemy. I helped his family when they had nothing. If he ever comes into your life, treat him with the same kindness I would have shown him." She looked up. "So you're not claiming any of my mother's property?" "No." "Why go through all this then?" "Because your mother never meant to take anything away from you," he said. "She only wanted to make sure that if her estate was ever challenged, the truth would come out with it." Amaka let out a long breath. The last mystery had unraveled into something almost gentle. David wasn't a hidden sibling or a rival, just the son of a woman her mother had once quietly helped, and his claim had only surfaced because his family's old records happened to be tangled up in Sarah's estate. Once everything was reviewed, the lawyer confirmed it in writing. Amaka was the rightful beneficiary. The properties were hers. Madam Kate had no legal claim to any of it. What Amaka chose to do with that news surprised everyone. She didn't throw Madam Kate out. She didn't humiliate her publicly. She didn't ask for revenge. Instead, she turned to her father. "Papa, let the house stay yours." Ubani stared at her. "What?" "I don't want to take your home from you. But it belongs to you now." "I know." She smiled. "I have something better." "What's that?" "A chance to build a life without carrying hate around in it." His eyes filled. Nearby, Madam Kate stood frozen, unable to find words. Amaka turned to her. "I can't undo what happened," she said. "And I don't want to spend the rest of my life hating you for it." Madam Kate started to cry. "I don't deserve this kindness." "Maybe not," Amaka said gently. "But I deserve peace." Those words settled over the room and stayed there. Alex watched his wife with something close to reverence. He thought back to the first time he'd seen her, tired and overlooked, scrubbing plates behind that restaurant while the people who should have loved her treated her like she had no value at all. She'd chosen kindness anyway, every single time. He understood now that her real inheritance had never been her mother's property. It had always been the heart she'd carried through every hard year of her life. Months went by. Amaka started working alongside Alex in his businesses, not interested in simply spending his money but in putting it to use. Together they built a small support fund for hardworking women who wanted to start businesses of their own but had no capital to begin with. She knew exactly what it felt like to work yourself to the bone with no one noticing, and she wanted other women to know their circumstances didn't get to define their worth. One afternoon she went back to the restaurant where it had all started. It looked different somehow, or maybe she was the one who'd changed. Madam Kate had softened over the months, grown quieter, more thoughtful, less quick to cut someone down. When she saw Amaka come through the door, she stood. For a moment neither of them said anything. Then Madam Kate smiled. "You've become a strong woman." "I learned it the hard way," Amaka said, smiling back. "I'm sorry," Madam Kate said. "And thank you for forgiving me." Amaka took her hand. "Let's leave the past where it belongs." Across the street, Alex was waiting. She crossed to him, smiling. "You're early. I wanted to see you. You could have just called. I wanted to see your face." She laughed. "You're getting far too romantic these days." "Maybe marriage did that to me." She tilted her head at him. "Do you remember when I thought you were blind?" "I remember. I was so afraid." "I know. And you were faking the whole time." "I was." "You really tricked me, you know that?" "I did." "Would you do it again?" His face turned serious. "No." "Why not?" "Because I know now that trust is worth more than any test I could put someone through." She smiled and let the silence hold for a moment. The man she'd once believed had nothing to his name had ended up giving her something no amount of money could buy: respect. The woman who'd once called her useless had, without ever meaning to, pushed her toward exactly the life she was meant to live. And the girl who used to cry quietly over a bucket of dishwater had grown into a woman who finally knew her own worth. But maybe the real lesson in all of it wasn't that Amaka had married a wealthy man, or that her mother's property had finally come back to her, or even that Madam Kate had owned up to what she'd done. The real lesson was simpler than that. Amaka's worth had been there all along, long before anyone else was willing to see it. She'd had it while she was scrubbing floors. She'd had it when no one wanted to marry her. She'd had it when she was called useless and treated as though she had nothing to offer. Her life didn't make her valuable when it finally changed for the better. The world just finally caught up to what had always been true. As the sun sank behind the rooftops, Amaka rested her head against Alex's shoulder and watched the city move around them. People heading home, shops pulling down their shutters, traffic easing through the evening. Life going on the way it does. But something inside her had finally gone quiet too. She no longer needed Madam Kate's approval. She no longer needed a stranger to choose her before she could believe she was worth choosing. She no longer needed wealth to prove anything at all. She simply knew who she was. And that turned out to be worth more than any inheritance her mother could have left her. A closing thought. Sometimes the people who treat us as though we're worthless simply can't see what's actually there, but their blindness was never proof of anything about us. Amaka was rejected, overworked, and made to feel like a burden for years, and she kept working, kept being kind, and refused to let any of it curdle into bitterness. That kindness ended up opening a door she never saw coming. Alex walked into her life pretending to be poor and blind, but he was the one, ironically, who could actually see past the surface straight to her character when everyone else in that town had only ever looked at what she owned or didn't. It's worth remembering, don't measure anyone by their clothes, their job, their bank account, or what they can offer you in return. Someone with nothing today might be the richest person you know tomorrow in every way that counts, and someone who looks powerful on the outside can be hollowed out on the inside. And forgiveness, as Amaka showed, was never about pretending nothing happened. Sometimes it just means refusing to let someone else's mistake keep steering your life. She forgave Madame Kate, but she also drew a line and kept her peace. Above all, don't let rejection convince you that you're worth less than you are. You might be overlooked today, underestimated today, told you're not enough today. None of that has anything to do with your actual worth. Keep doing right by people. Keep your heart soft where it counts. Keep working. Keep believing in yourself, because more often than people expect, the one everyone wrote off ends up being the one whose story sticks with everybody else long after. Maybe that's the whole point of Amaka's story. Never judge someone by what they seem to have, and never let how people treat you decide how you see yourself. Sometimes the person everyone calls useless is just a treasure nobody's bothered to look closely enough to find.
Moral lesson of this story: never judge a person by their appearance or their present condition. Alex looked like a poor blind man, but behind that appearance was a successful man with a kind heart. Amaka, despite being rejected and mistreated, she shows kindness, patience, and forgiveness.